Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, colleagues, alumni, and friends. We gather here this afternoon to honor and pay tribute to our colleague, friend, mentor, father, Prof Hansungule. Prof left us on Friday, 13 September 2024, and this terrible, terrible news shook the center, the University of Pretoria, and the entire human rights community around the world. Prof was 70 years, and indeed, a great giant has fallen. Prof worked with the center for 17 years. He took his appointment in January 2003 up until he retired in 2020. Prof was passionate about the plight of human rights in Africa and was actively involved as a consultant, advisor, academic, activist, and litigator. He also had a very accomplished academic credentials from the University of Zambia, where he obtained his LLB and LLM degrees. He also then got an LLM from the University of Graz and a doctorate from the University of Vienna. A very unique trait of Prof was how he perfected the art of teaching, law, through storytelling, which we all enjoyed as students. Throughout his lifetime at the center, he taught on various programs, such as the master's degree program on human rights and democratization in Africa, the HRDA, and he was also the academic coordinator for the multidisciplinary human rights program. He also taught on the advanced human rights short courses, and he was also very, very passionate about the right to development in Africa. So he was the academic coordinator for this particular aspect of these short courses. And he participated as well in the human rights moot court competition, where he highlighted themes that were highlighted in the hypothetical case. He sort of explained these themes to students during the moot court competition. Internationally, he taught international human rights law at universities worldwide, including the University of Lund in Sweden, Mahidol University in Thailand, the University of Essex in the UK, Åbo Academy University in Finland, and the University of Malta. He served as a member of the independent technical team established to measure compliance of countries with the governance and human rights requirements of the new Economic Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. He also served as independent expert of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and as a board member of Minority Groups International. At the time of his untimely death, Prof was a commissioner of the International Commission of Jurists, where he served for 3 consecutive terms. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, we take this moment to celebrate his well-lived life, but also to reflect on his work and legacy. So this afternoon, I don't know whether the program has been shared with you, but I can just take you through the program just quickly. So we have 2 representatives from Professor Hansungule's family. We have his nephew, Luamba Mudala, and also represented is his daughter Zita. But Luamba would represent the family and share his tribute with us. After Luamba, we would then move to inviting Professor Francis Viljoen to, anyway, so for those of you who do not know him, he's a professor at the Center for Human Rights here at the University of Pretoria. And then he will be followed by Professor Charles Fombad, Director, International Comparative Law Unit, here also at the center. We would then be followed by Professor Nkatha Morongi, and then will be followed by Mr. Lloyd Kuveya, who is the Assistant Director of the Center for Human Rights. And then from the University of the Free State, we will have Professor Serge Kamga, who also say a few words on his behalf and on behalf of the University of the Free State. And then later, I think we will allocate 10 minutes to each speaker. So then that will take us to about 50 or so minutes. And then later we would then have tributes from former colleagues, students, friends, and associates who are present here. So please, you let me know if you want to share your memory as well. Just let us know by indicating this in the chats, and we would note that and give you a chance to do so. So without wasting much time, I think I will call then on Professor Francis Viljoen to share his memories with us. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and good afternoon, everyone, in particular, Mudala and Zita and everyone here. Maybe just to contextualize, I suppose we do this remembrance moment at the beginning of our academic year. This is when our Human Rights and Democratization in Africa program starts. And it is also a chosen moment because of the vast influence that Professor Hansungule had on many, many students who attended this academic program over the years. So we thought it would be opportune to use this moment to reflect on his contributions to the center, but also to students more broadly. So I reflected also then on the interaction of his life with that of the students. We have what we call a human rights clinic in the human rights program. And forever, I think his memory will be alive in those who study children's law or children's rights in Africa, because one of the clinics prepared a case, and that case was brought to the African Union's Committee on the Rights of the Child. And the case is called Michelo Hansungule and others versus Uganda. And that case led, it was actually the first case submitted to that committee, and it led to a finding of a violation against Uganda and helped to form the law in this domain. So I think it is just a clear example of how his life intersected with those of realities on the ground, and also how his work together with students led to some tangible outcome. For myself, I can say that I was, in a sense, a student of Professor Hansungule, in the sense that I now remember that my PhD thesis was actually assessed. He was the assessor, he was the external examiner of my thesis. So I was okayed by Professor Hansungule, and I take that as a blessing. But later on, we became colleagues, and I really got to know him first when even before he came to join the center, he was working on education around officials and tribal leaders, religious leaders in South Africa around human rights. It was the time of the coming of the new South Africa, and he was working with Raoul Wallenberg Institute, and he was such a successful communicator, I thought, especially with a cross-section of people. One of his great attributes was his ability to relate, I think, across the board and across the spectrum. And he was such a powerful and effective educator of human rights. And I think we, as a center, benefited so well from that particularly. But so he came to the center in 2004 for a good 15 years. So in those 15 years, I think we got to know him much better and we saw great highlights. And I'll just ponder upon one or two of those. The first, I think, is that he brought into his teaching, into his engagement with students, the African personality that he was. Looking at him, he embodied the African personality, but also he made sure that academically he would be the one asking, let's call it the African question. He would challenge you as a student, as a colleague. How does what you do relate to the realities of the African continent? How does what you think perhaps fit into or doesn't fit into an African understanding and an African philosophy broadly understood? So for me personally, I think that challenge, that shining light that he held out to us was one of his salient contributions. The other was, and Dennis, you mentioned that his ability to construct a lecture by diverging storylines. And just when you thought all the stories are going in different directions, he was able to pull them together and convincingly link that to the, sometimes slightly less concrete academic material in front of you. So he was a magician, I think, as a teacher, to pull those narratives together and make you understand concepts so much better and clearer. I think he was also a great all-rounder because in the center, he was often the person that when we had to call on someone to give a lecture on any diversity of topics, he was the one. He would be able to muster his resources and speak to an audience in all of our units on a topic that you could ask him to do at short notice. But I think the one topic that was the closest to his heart was that of the right to development. And I think, perhaps he has made his greatest contribution academically and also in terms of students who studied with him. He was the one who held our short course, our advanced human rights course on the right to development together. And I think under his supervision, a number of students studied and completed, in particular, their doctoral theses around exploring that Article 22 of the African Charter, the right to development. So yes, he has been a very, very effective, a very passionate supervisor for students who did not only the master's by research, the master's mini dissertation, but particularly the doctoral thesis. I started to count, and I counted at least 20 doctoral theses that have been completed under his supervision. And it's not just that people completed, but they reach such high heights after doing so, in the course of doing so. We are reminding that Professor Saj, who will talk later, who was one of his students, who's now the dean in the University of the Free State Faculty of Law. There is, for example, Innocent Maja, Dr. Maja, who is now dean at the University of Zimbabwe. There is Azubike Onurua Oguno, who is head of department in Ilorin University. And also at the master's level, now famously, there is also the master's student, Kaswaga, who is now a judge of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. So I think we are really seeing the handiwork of Professor Hansungule, how he has forged and influenced these individuals and also assisted them and enabled them to reach these great heights. I think perhaps then to just maybe highlight one other aspect, and that would be to say that he was also a very giving person. I remember often sitting here because we shared a corridor here in the office space. I would hear for hours and hours. He would be there would be a long queue of students, and he would devote his whole day to having various interviews and discussions with students, and those were very, very engaging, very influential. So I think he was someone who had time for his students, who was endless in his passion for human rights, for understanding through an African lens, and he brought that all to bear. So we at the center, certainly we've been fortunate to have him as a colleague, and we know that his lasting legacy really lies in the many, many lives of the alumni that he had touched, and the great contributions he's made in so many fields of African human rights law. We remember you, Michelo, with great fondness, and we honor your memory today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Viljoen, for those very warm words, sharing the memories of our dear colleague, Professor Hansungule. I would now at this stage call on Professor Fombad to also share his memories with us. Prof.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say a few words to honor the memory of our highly esteemed colleague, whose passing away is a massive loss, not just to his family, but to the whole academic community. Let me probably start by expressing my profound condolences to Mrs. Hansungule, the Hansungule children, and the Hansungule family as a whole. We cannot imagine the enormity of your loss and how you feel. All we can say is that God gives unasked and God takes unasked. May He comfort you and give you peace. May He grant you the strength to move on. I was privileged and honored to have known Professor Hansungule ever since I joined the University of Pretoria in January 2010. Interestingly, Professor Hansungule happened to have been my teacher. Yes, my teacher. I actually met him for the very first time in Harare in 2003 during a 3-week short course on human rights. He is the one who not only introduced me to, but actually taught me human rights for the first time. Based on that 3-week short course, I started writing on human rights issue. In fact, my first paper based on that course appeared in the British journal, The International and Comparative Law Quarterly in 2004. As many have said, and I can confirm from my personal experience and brief encounter with Professor Hansungule in 2003, he was an excellent teacher with a unique style. He was a guy who was always smiling. And as Professor Franz Viljoen said, he had interesting stories which blended with his lectures. He is the one who made me to develop an interest in human rights. We, his former students and colleagues, will miss him dearly. But we are honored by the contribution he made during his lifetime to human rights teaching and research. And I think we, his colleagues, owe it to him to continue to teach. And we've been inspired by his unique style of teaching. I just want to end by saying, may the Almighty God welcome him in his presence, and that may his soul rest in perfect peace. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon. Dennis, are you there? We just check to see if Professor Nkata is around. Maybe then Professor Nkata Murungi, who is the current acting director of the Center for Human Rights, maybe she can then also give her own tributes to remember Professor Hansungule. Prof Nkata.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. I apologize. I think Dennis, his connection just fell off. He should be back. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from, friends, colleagues, students, alumni. I'm very happy to join you in sharing just in very brief terms, memories and reflecting in honor of Professor Hansungule. I met Prof Hansungule myself in 2009 when I came to study at the University of Pretoria. I was, I think I had not met him before. I was very fresh and, very interested in learning human rights. And I think as has already been said, his style was very unique because to us as students, he was somewhere between not sounding serious, but still very, very serious about the issues that he was teaching. I found it unique, refreshing, and I also found it that it made him much more approachable than a typical professor of human rights, probably in other institutions that we had been used to before coming here. Later, I left and I went to study at the University of the Western Cape. And I think one of the main memories I have of my interaction with Professor Hansungule while I was at UWC is that when I was in the second year of my PhD studies, I was looking for an opportunity to do research for an institutional visit. And I remember I had a chat with him and he told me about going to the University in Finland, Abo Academy. And he linked me up with Professor Katarina there and he gave me a recommendation. And eventually I was able to take up studies, a brief research visit that became very instrumental to the formation of my research subsequently. That was 2011. And since then, I maintained, a contact with him. I think, especially when I came for the short courses while working in Ethiopia, and I would come to South Africa, and I would always make sure that I went to say hello to Professor Hansungule. Then I came to the center on a more full-time basis, and I came and I met him here. And we did quite a bit of work together, including in the areas of women's rights, working with the Women's Rights Unit on state reporting and training of states, member states on these issues. Overall, I would say Hansungule was a staple, if you can say that, at the Center for Human Rights. His name was easily known, easily recognizable. He was familiar in all, he was easily recognizable in all human rights circles, whether it's in academia, government institutions, intergovernmental agencies, and even in the CSO sector. He was not the typical academic that was only known in the academic circles. He had such a breadth of engagement across all sectors. And so I think we can say without a doubt that his work traversed, the different sectors where human rights was relevant, and he shared knowledge and experience with audiences both at home and abroad, with young people, with older people. It was quite a very vast range of influence. And often at times you would be, if you interacted with Prof Hansungule, you would be forgiven for assuming that he was one of the local participants in a workshop or in a meeting, because he had a very easy way of blending in with the crowd at meetings, and you'd you would just simply mistake him for the villagers attending an event in some place. And I think that in itself is a very unique personality, and it made it possible for him to engage with people, whether they were the most vulnerable or the most powerful, seamlessly. So I think it's something that I reflect on with admiration, because it's not a lot of us professionals who are able to break those barriers as easily as he did. And as has been said by the speakers before me, he had a storytelling as his chosen way of engagement. And he had anecdotes on how he engaged with various African leaders. He could tell you stories on end. My recollection of our master's class was him telling us stories of the various times he had met with which representatives of governments negotiating which treaty or in which discussion, in very simplistic ways, but which in ways that also made you realize that governments are actually run by people, not necessarily as strange or as mysterious as we think them to be. I think he was very comfortable, if I may say so, in a bit of a village persona. He was in his identity an African human rights scholar. He was comfortable, whether he was as a scholar or sitting as an expert or sitting in some lofty panel, whether at the ICJ or anywhere else. But he still very much maintained that persona of the old man in the village, interacting with compatriots. And I think, yeah, again, I just think it's very unique. It's not everybody who is able to do that. His reach over the years has been mentioned as Prof Francis was going through the list of those who graduated under his supervision. I was just thinking of how, it cuts through academia, African Union, students, scholars, institutions, government bureaucrats, politicians, which has also become evident in the tributes that we saw upon his passing at his funeral, the representation of the different sectors that were connected to him. I think they testify to a dynamic intellect and a dynamic personality. And I think we are very pleased to have had the opportunity to engage with him. He was an avowed Pan-Africanist, and he truly believed in Africa. He believed in African people, he believed in the African identity, African culture, African values, and African future. He would make jokes of it, of how things are dysfunctional or not working, but he would also be the first defender of Africa as a region and of Africa as a people. So I think if there was anything that was never in doubt was Prof Hansungule's commitment to Africa in its entirety, its people and its continent. And I think because he had an interesting story to tell about every country on the continent or about its people, he came alive in, his human rights passion came alive through these interactions. As he was talking, his passion came through those stories. He would be laughing, but you would see that he's really truly committed to the things he was saying. So I think with his death, the center and the human rights community generally lost a very valuable resource. He was somewhat of a human rights history encyclopedia, particularly in relation to the African region and the formation of the different institutions. I think, yeah, it's only fitting that we pay this tribute to him in memory of who he was, but also in cherishing the contributions that he made that we continue to harness going into the future. So I think, yeah, that's just my reflections of him, and I pray that his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Professor Murungi, for your reflections. And I apologize for not being there for a bit. I had some technical issues, so I am now Franz for the time being. I would like to now call on Mr. Lloyd Kuvea to also share his memories with us.
Thank you so much, Dennis, and good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, from wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us as we remember our colleague, Professor Michelo Hansungule. We really miss Professor Hansungule for a variety of reasons that I will explain in the following words. First of all, for me, I think Professor Frans Viljoen also mentioned it, and Professor Fombard, that he was such a versatile international human rights law teacher. But not only was he versatile, he was quite charismatic. I first met Professor Hansungule in Harare in 2005 when he had come to teach there to train human rights activists and lawyers on international human rights law. It was just quite a memorable training, and you could see the depth of knowledge, but also the experiences that he shared about the things that he had done on the African human rights on the continent to engage, particularly the political leadership, to ensure that they respect human rights and they respect, democracy. So he was also, a mentor and, an excellent supervisor, as has been mentioned by Professor Viljoen. He did quite a lot in terms of teaching so many students. I was also his student in 2006. So many other students that he has taught, I think they're very fond memories of Professor Hansungule. Every time when you meet at events and so on and so forth, people always take the time to talk about the impact that he made on the continent in terms of his contribution, in building that cadre of human rights advocates on the continent. So I would also call him an activist, in a way. He was an academic, but also was an activist. He believed in constructive engagement also, especially the political class. I think usually as academics and civil society, people are sometimes reluctant to engage that political class, but for him, he always say that if you want to change, the architecture of human rights and democracy and the rule of law, you have to engage the people that have the power to make it happen. And I think that's one of the things that I remember fondly, about Professor Hansungule. I also recall his time between 2011 and 2023 when he was a commissioner at the International Commission of Jurists. It's not always easy, I think, if you are in civil society or academia to train judges. And, usually judges, they prefer to be trained by somebody that they respect, somebody with gravitas. And I think at that time when I was also working in civil society organizations, and particularly the International Commission of Jurists, and when we were to train judges around the continent, he was the go-to person in terms of, assisting with facilitation, to train judges on various issues of concern, but particularly around human rights, judicial independence, and the rule of law. So he really made a great contribution. And I also recall when we were trying to resolve the leadership crisis within the judiciary in Lesotho and Swaziland. Whilst we were focused on engaging, the lawyers, the civil society activists, and members of the judiciary, he also said, look, let me also take the time to engage the political leadership in these two kingdoms. And, indeed, it helped, in terms of ensuring that that the leadership crisis within the judiciaries of these two kingdoms were resolved. So this is one of the moments that I really remember Professor Hansungule in terms of his effectiveness in bringing about change within so many of our African countries. And I think I believe he visited close to maybe 50, almost all the countries in Africa, perhaps, where he reached out, to engage, to train, to teach, and so on and so forth. I mean, of course, he was also very committed to his own country, Zambia. He was a Zambian national. And I think between 2016 and 2021, when we had the human rights and democracy crisis in Zambia, he was one of those people that we consulted, in terms of what next, what do we do to ensure that there is change in Zambia? And he was quite instrumental with his insights and his advice to the extent that I remember during that period, we were able to meet the then president, Edgar Lungu, and the leader of the opposition party, Hakainde Hichilema, to discuss the political questions and issues in Zambia, particularly issues around the rule of law, issues around freedom of expression, association, and assembly, which were being violated left, right, and center in Zambia. And it appeared, and with impunity, and it appeared that there wasn't going to be any resolution of that crisis. But at least with Professor Hansungule's, insights and leadership, we were able to engage, and thankfully we saw a change of leadership with Hakainde Hichilema being elected in 2021. And I think the fact that Hakainde Hichilema was actually at Professor Hansungule's funeral is also a testament of the extent to which, he was respected even by political leaders themselves. Yeah, so just to highlight that fact that, he was well connected even in the political leadership sector, and he was not just confined perhaps to academia in that regard, but also the advice that he gave to various regional and international bodies, including Amnesty International on issues around economic, social, and cultural rights, to ICJ itself in his capacity as a commissioner then, and also to other bodies like NEPAD, the APRIM, and the Pan-African Parliament. That commitment to improving the governance, within the continent, it was paramount, I think, in his own vision for the continent. So we remember Professor Hansungule quite fondly, and just to say that the University of Zambia will be organizing a human rights lecture to remember him in September this year. And as a center, we're going to also be part of it, and contribute in terms of some of the speakers that will participate in that particular conference. And I hope some of the professors who have spoken here who might have time to participate in that memorial lecture to remember Professor Hansungule in September. I'm thinking of Prof Sage Kamka, Professor Fombard, Prof Feliun. If their time permits in September, it will be great, really, as we honor and remember Professor Hansungule, to once again gather at the University of Zambia, where he also taught, and deliver a memorial lecture. Thank you so much to the Hansungule family. We pray and hope that the Lord will continue to comfort you, even as we continue to remember Prof Hansungule. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Lloyd, for sharing these fond memories with us. I know Prof Sage Kamka is currently traveling and might be at the airport currently. But if Professor Kamka, if you are here with us, would you kindly take the floor and share your memories with us as well? Prof Kamka? Okay, so then we would, if Prof is not with us, I know he's traveling. He actually indicated that he might be at the airport by the time we're having this webinar. So I think maybe he's not connected at the moment. But we would then want to proceed and invite the family of Professor Michelo Hansungule. Beyond him being an academic and all the wonderful things that he has achieved academically, he was also a family man. So I would like to invite Luamba Mudala, who is a nephew of Professor Hansungule, to say a few words on behalf of the Hansungule family. Luamba?
Okay, thank you so much. As it has been mentioned, my name is Luamba Mudala. I am a nephew to Professor Michelo Hansungule. I would like to say today we are looking at Michelo, the village boy. He was born in a rural area of Zambia, Mapanza. His father was a farmer and village builder, while his mother was just a village farmer. Michelo is a common noun in Chitonga, which is a language in Zambia, which means medicine. His parents could not have a third child for more than 10 years, not until some village woman aided Michelo's mother with some African medicine. And it was at that point that Michelo was conceived. Coming to the name Kennedy, his primary school teacher was impressed with his intelligence and activeness during classes. He therefore nicknamed him John F. Kennedy. He would tell him that he will one day be a president just as John F. Kennedy. Prof's childhood is full of play just as any other village boy. He was a very good soccer player. I'm sure a lot of you are hearing it for the first time. Very good soccer player that played football for his school as a goalkeeper. And in his time, he won a lot of accolades in the village by that time. He would actually explain this story so well to a point where he would always say, I was among the best goalkeepers in the village, who had actually attracted the attention of young ladies that would come to yell, make nice noise, encouraging me to do the best. The journey for human rights protection for Michelo starts far back in his secondary school days, when he could lock himself in a grass-thatched house to study all day, at times without even having lunch. This to the family meant that he wanted to be a scholar. Thereafter, it is seen through his stance to defend his mother from being battered by her husband. Michelo, as young as he was, he stood his foot on one night and warned his father never to lay a hand on his mother anymore. It was from this point that he strongly stood for women's rights, and he would take time to counsel all male relatives and villagers not to engage themselves in women battering or any sort of female abuse. He was very dramatic when in the mood, very, very dramatic. He would sing songs, hymns, tell old stories of their young life in the village. And some of these stories, if you're not careful, they would be told to you starting from 19 hours up to 24 hours. Among the stories he liked is when he was 3, and he would always follow his brother Malala to school. One day, as he sat resting on the grass-thatched makeshift, which was in form of a school by then, he dozed off and rested his full weight on it. And then it collapsed. Every time he mentioned the way it collapsed, he would laugh. Then the brother woke him up, exclaiming, Michelo, you have destroyed the classroom. Michelo, you have destroyed the classroom. During Christmas, he would sing village songs to us, make voice notes, send it to each and every family member, send hymns, especially songs that they would sing as a family in the old time with their father. And we can say Michelo, as a family, we are calling him as a man that disliked lazy people. He made sure he pushed all of us to work extra hard in everything we did. He always reminded us as children that all the wealth he had was all his because of his hard working. So if we wish to live well too in life, we needed to work hard. He always said hard work was the key. He disliked people that took advantage of others or talked bad about others. When you talk bad about your friend, he would take time to call that other person you're talking about, and then you sit. Then you would say, what were you saying about your friend? Explain now, so that we solve the issue. Michelo always encouraged us to live within the law and would always say, the law never forgets. The law never forgets. He was a serious traditionist and historian that loved research, challenges, and much of the family history we are enjoying right now. He labored to dig deeper for it to be complete. We have similar stories of, for instance, the story of Michelo's grandfather, Yambai, whom at a certain point in time was taken to be a slave in what was known as Barosiland. He pushed his way up to Barosiland to trace the track of his grandfather, where he actually managed to get information in order to deliver to the family for us to get educated over it. Michelo enjoyed village food very much. And among the village food he enjoyed, especially in Zambia, it was one of the drinks, traditional drinks known as Jiwanto. This is a traditional sweet brew. He also enjoyed delele, which is okra. At times he would buy and freely walk with a 5-liter container of Jiwanto, even in what we mind as high-profile places. This always never sat well with us, the children, the nephews, and the nieces. And we could scold him by saying, you are a professor. Stop carrying such things in public. He would laugh and reply with a question, who am I? Who am I? I am Michelo. Before becoming professor, this is what made us go. And then he moves with it. We miss his 3-page text on WhatsApp and emails. Whenever you just see his text popping, just know that this is a 3-page text. And none of us in the family would reply his text direct without consulting from a second person. They were always complex and complicated, such that you needed to sit down calmly, not for anything less than an hour. We would always make sure we proofread the reply not less than 5 times. This was so because your reply would be used against you even after 5 years. He never used to forget what you had told him. 75% of his text would be sent between 23 hours and 04 hours. This really means he rarely slept. He was always awake, doing his work. In his last years, he spent much of his time in the village, and his quota would always have crowds of people waiting for various aids, be it advice, conflict resolution, research, development discussion, and so on and so forth. While in the village, he would dress like that common villager. I really agree with Professor Nkata on that part. He would really dress like that common villager, such that one who never knew him would think he was just that uneducated villager. Very few people would even know that he directly spoke to presidents like Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. He completely mingled with the villager to a level of being a villager himself. And that is why he had a lot of access to information in terms of problems of what his village men were going through. A quick instance, 6 months before his death, there was a contractor that was given a contract to work on a certain road about 60 kilometers away from his village. And that contractor got down to go and get water from the stream that was already drying. And that was the only surviving stream to serve the village with water. He, without hesitance, called the in charge of that construction company and told them off that if you dry this water, where will my people go to? Can you quickly leave right now? And I will not fear wherever you are going to take me as long as I'm serving my people. They need water, their animals also need water. He knew his traditional roles as an uncle, cousin, and brother. All his nephews, none of them can be reported to have paid for themselves when it comes to dowry. He refunded if he had you made any payment, as he always said, it is my duty and not your duty. He never allowed anyone in the village to contribute any amount when it comes to purchase of a coffin of a brother, a niece, a nephew. He said it was his role. Whether he had money or no money, he always said, it is my role. Till his death, education was the most important thing one would go. It is to this effect that he responded so well by sponsoring many children to go to school. Whenever he found a child in a uniform, he would stop to greet that child. And if that child had no shoes or worn out uniform, he would there and then provide. Even when he had less, he would provide for such. With him, school was the key. In conclusion, we are saying Professor Michelo is a very difficult person to describe as a family, because within us, the children, the nephews, others prefer to call him dad, others love to call him prof, others took after his academic role in order for him to mold them. And at the end of the day, we are saying the family records of the most exposed and the highest in education qualification is held by Professor Michelo Kennedy Hansungule up to now. In conclusion, we would also like to appreciate the center for this wonderful and awesome. We never knew and we never expected this as a family. It grew goosebumps, and we appreciate so much. You've made us realize that he's a person that was loved by everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Luamba, for highlighting Professor as a family member who pushed and encouraged everyone to work hard, but also someone who really enjoyed village life and was indeed a man of the people. Thank you so very much. At this point, we would like to now invite former colleagues, students, friends, and associates who wish to also say a few words and share their attributes. To also just show by hand, I see that Shuma wants to say something, so I would want to invite Shuma to please take the floor. Please be quite concise and take about 5 minutes to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I met Prof in 2014. I didn't know about the center myself. I was just a wandering student who was just interested in education, and apparently at the center there, outside there was an office that used to deal with international humanitarian stuff. So I was quite interested in that. Then I entered the building. The moment I entered the building, I was directed to his office. It was around 5 in the late afternoon. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because he was not only very welcoming person, but he knew how to identify talent. That's what struck me the most. In just 5 minutes or less having a conversation with him, he quickly had identified the talent and he gave me confidence. You know, this is something that is very priceless attribute to have, that not many people do have. It may not have happened the way it had panned out, that not every one of us became an accomplished academic. But as a person who has worked in a non-profit sector, you know, there are many ways that a person can influence. And I can assure you that his influence and confidence has brought a lot of joy. And I could not wait for me, you know, to express my gratitude for this opportunity, because now I participate in various summits in the world, you know, because of the confidence that he gave me. That, you know, for me, it was about law itself. It was not about human rights in an isolated space, but it was the essence of law that, you know, when you spoke to him, he actually brought that interest in me that I never knew that I had before. So those are my 2 cents that I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shuma. I would like now to invite Ade Johnson to also share her memory.
Thank you, Dennis. I just want to share a memory that I shared on social media. I'm going to read it out. I shared it when he died, soon after we heard about his death. An African icon has fallen. A tribute to Professor Michelo Hansungule. I arrived Pretoria for the multidisciplinary human rights MPhil late. I could not attend classes until I had spoken to the lecturers. I remember stepping gingerly into your office, uncertain about my fate. The conversation that day marked the beginning of our academic relationship. I started attending the Socioeconomic Rights course, SR 801. I loved your class. How I loved the African stories you told so effortlessly. Your storytelling skills and passion for all things human rights in Africa captivated me. Then working and traveling together to several African countries for the center's women's rights training was a huge honor and privilege. We talked together, we laughed together, we gisted. You shared your spotlight with us. Thank you, Prof. You were so kind, so wise and funny. Your passion for human rights in Africa showed in your teaching, training, and facilitation. Always top-notch. You had a ready answer and brought calm and clarity to contested issues. You called me daughter. Indeed, you were an academic leader, father, teacher, and icon. I wear the daughter badge proudly alongside your numerous academic offsprings. I remember you when I teach, and in my sometimes lame attempts to share personal anecdotes. Your African storytelling and ability to tell African stories is a huge part of efforts at decolonizing knowledge. Your legacy lives on, African icon, a true academic. Rest well, my learned professor. You will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ade. I would like now to call on Dr. Patricia Acheno Kira to also share her memories with us. Patricia.
Hello, Kweku, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay.
So, Kweku, perhaps we can go ahead with the rest of the program and then allow the speaker to come back when the connectivity is more.
Okay. So if there's anyone else who would want to say something? Okay. Because we actually coming to the end of the proceedings now.
Kweku, can you still hear me? The network is a bit bad.
Sure. Okay, I can hear you now. Just let's try again. Go ahead.
Okay, I was saying Professor really touched our lives, especially with the African students, and gave me a lot of support when I was doing my doctorate in law. At times when I could not afford to come and stay in Pretoria, Professor would ask me to come and teach in the specialized human rights courses. And I came and taught and got the opportunity to even consult with him. So, and he
All right. So I think Patricia is struggling with her connection.
And Professor really touched our lives in different ways. He came and attended the judges conference and made a significant contribution in the discourse of international human rights law. So Professor, we will always remember Professor. He has touched our lives. And today I serve as the Deputy Inspector General of Government of Uganda. I have served as a commission member in the Uganda Human Rights Commission before, and I am basically implementing good governance and the seeds Professor sowed in my life. And he has touched many others, even through mentorship, through encouragement. And I see most of the fruits of Professor spread all over the world. So the legacy of Professor Hansungule will continue to live in our lives, alive. And for me today, from the time I learned that Professor had passed on, I decided to take on another doctorate from Northwest University to add on to what Professor left me with. So may God bless you all, and thank you very much, Dennis Kweku, for organizing this. May God bless you. Over and out.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Patricia, for sharing these warm memories of Professor Hansungule. So I don't see any other person showing hand or indicating that they would want to also share anything yet. So we may have to proceed to end the program. So I think I saw something here. Just hold on.
Muleya Hansungule.
Yes, okay, Muleya. Please go ahead, Muleya. Muleya? Lloyd, do you see any other person that I may miss here?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Okay, now I can hear you, Malaya.
Yes, thank you. This is Hansungule Mleya Mdala, the nephew to Professor Michelo Hansungule. I'm actually the young brother to Luamba. I feel so emotionally touched as a family member to hear a lot of people from around the world, the lives that my uncle, who I called my father, touched. It really touches my heart. I want to thank you for being in his life, for being there for him, and for giving him ears when he wanted to teach. As a family, we also say he taught us a lot, not only on family issues, but academically as well. Because when he came to you, he could tell you stories about us in the village. And when he came to us, he told us stories about you, academicians, judges, and other people. I really want to thank you. And we are planning that as well as a family, come on the Memorial Day. We look at how we can do a remembrance of him in the village, not only talking and dancing, but he also loved football. We would want to commemorate a tournament in remembrance of him and the whole lineage of our ancestors who went before us. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mleya. I would like to call on Professor Zubike to also share his memories with us. Prof?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everyone. For me, Prof holds a special place in my life. From the LLM days to the PhD days, he was more than a supervisor. We had very special relationship, and the only way for us to celebrate the wonderful things he did back in my university, in the University of Ilorin, the university has approved an award which was started this year for the best student that epitomizes the embodiment in knowledge and practice of the African human rights system. And the first recipient of the Michelo Hansungule Award this year got 100,000 naira. And the beautiful thing is, upon winning the award, the student got a scholarship and is right now in Turkey doing an LLM in international human rights laws. And it was a shock personally to hear of the passing of Prof. And we spoke about everything. I remember when we were in Zambia, in Lusaka, we were in the village, we were in the farm, we had goats, we had dances, and he had a special and unique way of passing across every wonderful message he wants to get across to you. So his memory lives on. We celebrate him back in Nigeria, and we'll keep celebrating him. God repose his soul. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Professor Zubike. And thank you to your institution for such an honor in the memory of our dear Professor Michelo Hansungule. I'm still trying to see if I'm not missing anyone. I see messages that are coming in, and this one is from Barbara that says, Professor was a very kind person. I enjoyed his stories in the LLM HRDA class of 2012. He will be dearly missed. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you, Barbara. Satang also said how we loved Prof Hansungule. Thank you for being a scholar, a teacher, guide, and an inspiration. May he rest in peace. Thank you, Satang, for that note as well. So in closing, I would like to say, in the words of the late actress, director, and civil rights activist Maya Angelou, she said, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. People would never forget how you made them feel." And I think Prof made us feel at home and encouraged us to learn and to grow in confidence and to explore and master new talents and skills. And there's, always, as I always say, there's always that one teacher that we never forget, that we would forever remember. And for many of us, I think, who are present here this afternoon, that teacher is Professor Michelo Hansungule, a man with a great sense of humor and wit. And I say that we will forever, remember you, and you would forever live in our hearts and memories, Prof. Rest in eternal peace, our dear Professor Hansungule. So we have come to the end of this webinar, and we thank all of you for coming to share your fond memories of Professor Hansungule, and may you have a very good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.